The winter wind cut through Sarah Martinez's thin jacket like a knife as she pulled her two daughters closer to her body. 8-year-old Emma shivered against her mother's side, while 5-year-old Lily dozed fitfully in Sarah's arms, her small face pale from the cold. They sat huddled together on a bench outside the closed gas station, their few possessions stuffed into 2 worn grocery bags at their feet. Christmas Eve had arrived with cruel irony. While families across the country gathered around warm fireplaces and decorated trees, Sarah found herself homeless with her 2 young daughters, watching the snow begin to fall on the empty streets of Cedar Ridge, Montana. The small town seemed to mock them with its festive decorations and glowing windows, each one representing the warmth and security they had lost. Just 3 months earlier, Sarah had been living a completely different life. She and her late husband Miguel had owned a small apartment in Denver, where he worked construction and she cleaned offices at night. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Miguel always promised that someday they would save enough to buy a little house with a yard where the girls could play. He would ruffle Emma's dark hair and tell her that one day she would have her own room painted any color she wanted. That dream died on a rainy September morning when Miguel's supervisor called to tell Sarah that there had been an accident at the construction site. A crane had malfunctioned, and Miguel was gone instantly. The supervisor's voice was gentle but distant, explaining about insurance and final paychecks, but Sarah heard none of it. The world had suddenly become a place where she was completely alone with 2 little girls who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. The insurance money barely covered the funeral costs. Sarah discovered that Miguel had been working without proper documentation, which meant no workers' compensation, no benefits, nothing but a final paycheck that wouldn't even cover a month's rent. She tried to keep their apartment, taking on extra cleaning jobs and working 18-hour days, but it was impossible. The landlord was patient for 2 months, but eventually the eviction notice came. Sarah had grown up in foster care and had no family to turn to. Miguel's family lived in Mexico, and, while they grieved with her over the phone, they had no means to help financially. Friends offered couches for a night or 2, but everyone had their own struggles, their own families to feed. Sarah quickly learned that sympathy, while genuine, rarely came with the kind of long-term help she desperately needed. She sold everything they owned except for the girls' clothes and a few treasured items. Miguel's wedding ring bought them 2 weeks in a cheap motel. Her grandmother's necklace paid for another week. Soon there was nothing left to sell except her dignity, and that seemed to slip away piece by piece with each day they spent without a permanent roof over their heads. The girls handled the upheaval with the resilience of children, but Sarah could see the confusion and fear growing in their eyes. Emma, who had always been the responsible older sister, started asking fewer questions and helping more without being asked. She would hold Lily's hand when they walked and whisper stories to her at night when they stayed in the car. Lily, barely understanding what was happening, began clinging to her mother with desperate intensity, as if Sarah might disappear like Daddy had. They had been living in their old Honda Civic for 2 weeks when the transmission finally gave out in Cedar Ridge. Sarah had been driving north, following a lead about work at a truck stop near the Canadian border. The car simply rolled to a stop on Main Street, and no amount of prayer or pleading would make it start again. The local mechanic, a kind man named Pete, looked under the hood and shook his head sadly. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, his weathered face full of compassion. "She's done for. Would cost more to fix than the car's worth." Sarah stood there in Pete's garage, holding Lily while Emma pressed against her side, and felt the last of her hope drain away. She had $17 in her wallet, half a tank of gas in a car that wouldn't run, and 2 hungry children who trusted her to somehow make everything okay. Pete seemed to understand without being told. He didn't ask probing questions or demand explanations. Instead, he quietly helped them gather their belongings from the car and pointed them toward the gas station where they might be able to warm up and use the restroom. He even slipped Emma a candy bar when he thought Sarah wasn't looking. That was 3 days ago. Since then, they had been surviving on the kindness of strangers and Sarah's dwindling resources. The gas station manager let them use the restroom and buy small items without questioning why they lingered so long in the warmth. A woman at the diner gave them leftover soup and bread rolls yesterday. The local pastor had offered them a night in the church basement, but it was locked during the day, and Sarah was terrified of being separated from the girls if social services got involved. Now, as Christmas Eve snow began to accumulate on their bench, Sarah faced the hardest truth of all. She was out of options. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, and her daughters would wake up cold and hungry with no presents, no tree, no hope of anything better. She had failed them in the most fundamental way a mother could fail. Emma looked up at her with those serious brown eyes that reminded Sarah so much of Miguel. "Mama, are we going to sleep outside tonight?" Sarah's heart broke a little more. "I don't know, baby. Mama's still figuring things out." "Will Santa find us if we don't have a house?" Lily asked, her voice small and confused. Before Sarah could answer, the sound of a truck engine broke through the quiet night. A red pickup truck with a horse trailer attached pulled into the gas station parking lot. The driver, a tall man in a cowboy hat and heavy winter coat, climbed out and headed toward the pumps. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who belonged in this landscape of snow and wind. Sarah watched him pump gas, debating whether to approach him. Pride warred with desperation in her chest. She had asked for help so many times over the past weeks, had been turned away or given token assistance that barely made a difference. Each rejection felt like another small death of dignity. But, as the wind picked up and Lily shivered more violently in her arms, maternal instinct overrode pride. Sarah stood up carefully, settling Lily more securely on her hip. "Stay here with our things, Emma," she whispered. "I'll be right back." She walked across the parking lot toward the man, her heart hammering with nervous energy. He looked up as she approached, and she could see kind eyes beneath the brim of his hat. He was probably in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered hands of someone who worked outdoors. "Excuse me," Sarah began, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I'm sorry to bother you, but..." She stopped, suddenly, unsure how to explain their situation without sounding like she was running a scam. How do you tell a complete stranger that you're homeless on Christmas Eve with 2 small children and no idea what tomorrow will bring? The man seemed to sense her struggle. His expression softened, and he gestured toward the bench where Emma sat guarding their meager possessions. "Those your girls over there?" he asked gently. Sarah nodded, tears threatening to spill over. We're having some hard times. Our car broke down, and we don't have anywhere to go tonight. I was wondering if you might know of any shelters or churches that might..." She trailed off, seeing something shift in the man's expression. Not judgment or dismissal, but a deep recognition of human suffering that spoke of his own experiences with hardship. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Sarah. Sarah Martinez. And those are my daughters Emma and Lily." He extended his hand. "Name's Jack Morrison. I run a cattle ranch about 20 minutes outside of town." He paused, studying her face with careful attention. "When's the last time you and the girls had a hot meal?" The kindness in his voice nearly undid her completely. "Yesterday, I think. The diner gave us some soup." Jack was quiet for a long moment, looking from Sarah to the girls and back again. She could see him weighing something in his mind, making some kind of calculation that went beyond simple charity. Finally, he spoke. "I've got a big house out at the ranch. More room than one old cowboy needs. If you're willing to trust a stranger, you and the girls are welcome to spend the night. Maybe Christmas too, if you don't have other plans." Sarah stared at him in shock. We couldn't impose like that. You don't even know us." "Don't know you yet," Jack corrected with a slight smile. "But I know what it's like to be alone on Christmas. And I know what it's like to need help and be too proud to ask for it properly." Something in his tone suggested he was speaking from personal experience. Sarah looked back at her daughters, Emma trying so hard to be brave and Lily fighting sleep despite her exhaustion and cold. "Why would you help us?" she asked, needing to understand his motivation before she could accept. Jack was quiet again, and, when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain. "Lost my wife and son in a car accident 12 years ago. Since then, Christmas has been..." He paused, searching for words. "Well, it's been hard. Maybe helping you and the girls would help me too. The honesty of his answer touched something deep in Sarah's chest. This wasn't pity or charity from someone who couldn't understand loss. This was one broken person reaching out to another, offering what comfort he could. "We don't have money to pay you," she said quietly. "Didn't ask for any," Jack replied. "I'm asking if you and your daughters would like to come home with me for Christmas." Nothing more complicated than that. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, trying to read his intentions. Everything in her limited experience with strangers on the road told her to be cautious, to protect her children above all else. But something in Jack's weathered face and gentle manner spoke to a deeper instinct. Sometimes, her grandmother used to say, angels come disguised as ordinary people. "Okay," she said finally. "Thank you." Jack nodded once, as if the matter was settled. "Let me finish up here, and we'll get you girls somewhere warm." As Sarah walked back to collect Emma and Lily, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. It was fragile and uncertain, tempered by weeks of disappointment and fear. But it was there, growing stronger with each step toward her daughters. Emma looked up as she approached. "What did you ask him, Mama?" "He offered us a place to stay tonight," Sarah said, hardly believing the words herself. Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Like a real house?" "Like a real house," Sarah confirmed, lifting Lily back into her arms. Within minutes, Jack had loaded their few possessions into his truck and helped them into the warm cab. The heater blew blessed hot air, and Lily sighed contentedly as feeling returned to her frozen fingers. As they drove through the snowy streets of Cedar Ridge and out into the darkness of the Montana countryside, Sarah found herself praying silently. Not the desperate pleas for help that had become her constant companions, but something deeper. A prayer of gratitude for unexpected kindness and the possibility that tomorrow might be different than today. The ranch house appeared in the headlights like something from a dream, warm yellow light spilling from windows onto snow-covered porches. It was larger than Sarah had expected, built of logs and stone with a commanding view of the valley below. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could see the shapes of horses in a nearby paddock. Jack parked near the front door and turned to look at them. "Welcome to Morrison Ranch," he said simply. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." As they climbed the steps to the front porch, Sarah felt as though she was stepping into a different world entirely. A world where Christmas Eve meant safety and warmth instead of fear and uncertainty. Emma held tight to her hand, eyes wide with wonder, while Lily dozed against her shoulder. The front door opened to reveal a spacious living room with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and the kind of solid, settled feeling that comes from years of being truly home. Jack hung his hat on a hook by the door and helped them out of their thin coats. "You girls hungry?" he asked, addressing Emma and Lily directly. Emma nodded shyly, while Lily buried her face in Sarah's neck. "Well then, let's see what we can rustle up in the kitchen," Jack said. "Hope you don't mind simple food. I'm not much of a fancy cook." As they followed him deeper into the house, Sarah marveled at how normal everything felt. Not the forced cheerfulness of charity or the awkward pity of well-meaning strangers, but simple human hospitality offered without condition or judgment. The kitchen was large and well-used, with copper pots hanging from hooks and herbs growing in small pots on the windowsill. Jack opened the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients for what looked like it would be a substantial meal. "Girls, why don't you sit at the table there while I heat up some soup," he said. "And, Sarah, there's coffee in the pot if you want some." As Sarah poured herself coffee and watched Jack efficiently prepare food for her children, she felt tears threaten again. But these were different tears than the ones she had shed over the past months. These carried relief and gratitude instead of despair. Emma climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table and looked around with curious eyes. "Mr. Jack, do you live here all by yourself?" "Most of the time," Jack replied, stirring soup in a large pot. "Got some ranch hands who work with the cattle, but the house is just me." "Don't you get lonely?" Emma asked with the directness of childhood. Jack paused in his stirring, and Sarah saw shadow cross his face briefly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I keep busy. Got horses to tend and cattle to look after." keeps a man occupied. As he spoke, Sarah began to understand that Jack Morrison's kindness came from more than simple generosity. It came from a recognition of shared loneliness, the understanding of someone who knew what it meant to face holidays alone. The soup was thick with vegetables and beef, accompanied by fresh bread and butter. Sarah watched her daughters eat with an appetite she hadn't seen in weeks, their faces bright with the simple pleasure of being warm and fed. Lily chatted excitedly about the horses she had seen outside, while Emma asked careful questions about ranch life. Jack answered their questions with patience and genuine interest, and Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time since Miguel's death. There was something steady and reliable about this man, something that spoke to safety and shelter in ways that went beyond simple accommodation. After dinner, Jack showed them to their rooms upstairs. Emma and Lily would share a comfortable bedroom with twin beds and windows overlooking the paddocks, while Sarah had a room across the hall with a view of the snow-covered valley. "Bathroom's right here," Jack explained, opening a door between the rooms. "Clean towels in the closet, and help yourselves to whatever you need." As he turned to leave them to settle in, Emma spoke up hesitantly. "Mr. Jack? Thank you for letting us stay here." Jack's expression softened completely. "You're welcome, little miss. Sleep tight, and maybe tomorrow we can go see the horses up close." Emma's face lit up with excitement, and even Lily perked up at the mention of horses. After Jack had gone downstairs, Sarah helped the girls wash and get ready for bed. It felt surreal to be performing these ordinary rituals of bedtime in actual bedrooms with real beds and warm blankets. For weeks, bedtime had meant curling up together in the car or on benches, always cold, always uncertain about where they would be the next night. "Mama," Emma whispered as Sarah tucked her into bed, "is this real? Are we really going to sleep in beds tonight?" "Yes, baby," Sarah whispered back, smoothing her daughter's hair. "This is real." "Is Mr. Jack going to make us leave tomorrow?" Lily asked, her voice small with worry. "I don't think so," Sarah said honestly. "But even if we do have to leave, we'll figure it out. We always do, right?" Both girls nodded, though Sarah could see the fear still lingering in their eyes. They had learned, as she had, that good things were often temporary and that safety could disappear without warning. After the girls were asleep, Sarah sat by the window in her own room, looking out at the peaceful ranch landscape under moonlight. She could see the dark shapes of cattle in distant pastures and the comforting bulk of the barn and outbuildings. It was a working ranch, she realized, not just a hobby or weekend retreat. Jack Morrison was offering them shelter in a place that represented his life's work and daily livelihood. The generosity of it overwhelmed her. In a world that had shown her mostly indifference and sometimes cruelty, Jack had offered something precious beyond measure, unconditional kindness with no strings attached and no judgment passed. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Sarah? You decent?" Jack's voice came through the wood. "Yes, come in," she called quietly. Jack entered carrying a steaming mug, which he set on the nightstand beside her. "Thought you might like some hot chocolate. Help you sleep." She accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "Jack, I can't thank you enough for this. You've saved us." He was quiet for a moment, standing with his hands in his pockets, looking out the window at his land. "Mind if I ask what happened?" "You don't have to tell me if you'd rather not." Sarah found herself wanting to talk, to share the story that had led them to his doorstep. There was something about Jack's calm presence that invited confidence. She told him about Miguel's accident, about the slow slide from security to desperation, about the car breaking down and their days without shelter. Jack listened without interruption, his expression growing more thoughtful as the story unfolded. "I'm sorry," he said when she finished. "Sounds like life dealt you a hell of a hand." "I just keep thinking I should have done something different," Sarah said. "Been smarter with money, had a better plan, something." "Sometimes there is no better plan," Jack said quietly. "Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and all you can do is keep putting one foot in front of the other." There was something in his tone that suggested personal knowledge of such persistence through grief. "Can I ask about your family?" Sarah asked gently. "You mentioned losing them." Jack was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the careful control of someone who had learned to live with unbearable loss. Car accident on Christmas morning 12 years ago. Black ice on the highway. My wife Linda and my boy Tommy were coming back from her sister's house. Someone ran a red light and... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. How old was your son? 7. Same age as your Emma. Jack's voice was barely audible. Every Christmas since then, I've rattled around this big house thinking about all the presents that never got opened, all the Christmas mornings that never came. The pain in his words was raw and immediate, as fresh as if the accident had happened yesterday instead of 12 years ago. Sarah understood then why he had stopped for them, why he had opened his home to 3 strangers. It wasn't just charity, it was a desperate attempt to fill an emptiness that 12 Christmases alone hadn't healed. Maybe, she said carefully, this Christmas can be different for all of us. Jack looked at her then, and she saw hope struggling with habitual grief in his expression. Maybe it can, he said quietly. After Jack left her to sleep, Sarah lay in the comfortable bed and listened to the wind howling around the house. But, inside, everything was warm and safe. Her daughters were sleeping soundly in real beds for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, and, for the first time since Miguel's death, she wasn't afraid of it. She thought about Jack's story, about the terrible coincidence that had brought them together. 2 different kinds of loss, hers recent and raw, his old and settled into the rhythm of daily life, but loss nonetheless. Perhaps they could help each other heal, if only temporarily. As sleep finally took her, Sarah's last conscious thought was a prayer of gratitude for the stranger who had become their unexpected salvation, and for the possibility that tomorrow might bring something besides mere survival. Outside, snow continued to fall on the Morrison ranch, covering the world in a clean white blanket that promised the possibility of new beginnings. Sarah woke to the smell of bacon and coffee drifting up from the kitchen below. For a moment, she lay still in the unfamiliar bed, disoriented by the luxury of clean sheets and a warm room. Then, memory flooded back, Jack Morrison, the ranch, Christmas morning in a place that felt like sanctuary. Pale winter sunlight filtered through the curtains, and she could hear the distant sounds of horses nickering in the paddocks outside. More immediately, she could hear her daughters' voices mixed with Jack's deeper tones coming from the kitchen, punctuated by giggles that she hadn't heard from them in months. She dressed quickly in her cleanest clothes and made her way downstairs, following the sounds and sense of a real Christmas morning. What she found in the kitchen stopped her in her tracks. Jack stood at the stove flipping pancakes while Emma sat at the kitchen table, carefully setting out plates and silverware. Lily perched on a step stool beside Jack, proudly stirring something in a bowl that looked suspiciously like pancake batter. "Mama!" Lily called out when she saw Sarah. "Mr. Jack is teaching me how to make breakfast. I'm a good helper." "The best helper I've ever had," Jack confirmed with a smile, steadying Lily's enthusiastic stirring. "Morning, Sarah. Hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Sarah admitted, accepting the cup of coffee Emma brought her with ceremonial importance. "Mr. Jack has horses, Mama," Emma said, her eyes bright with excitement. "He said maybe later we could go see them if it's okay with you." Sarah looked at Jack questioningly. He was dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt, looking completely at ease with her daughters chattering around him. There was something different about his demeanor this morning, less guarded, more present than he had seemed the night before. "Only if you want to," he said to Sarah. "They're gentle horses, used to kids. But, no pressure." "Can we, Mama? Please?" Emma asked, bouncing slightly in her chair. "We'll see," Sarah said, though she was already leaning toward yes. Emma had always loved animals, and it had been so long since she had seen her daughter truly excited about anything. Jack transferred a stack of pancakes to a platter and set it in the center of the table alongside bacon, scrambled eggs, and fresh orange juice. It was more food than Sarah's family had seen in one place since before Miguel's death, and she felt overwhelmed by the abundance. "This is too much," she protested quietly. "You don't need to feed us like this." "It's Christmas morning," Jack said simply. Seemed like the right thing to do. As they ate, Jack regaled the girls with stories about ranch life. He told them about the time a calf got stuck in a fence and had to be rescued, about the horses who had learned to open gate latches with their teeth, about the barn cats who ruled the property with iron paws. Emma listened with rapt attention, asking detailed questions about everything from feeding schedules to veterinary care. Lily was more interested in the personalities of the animals, wanting to know which horses were friendly and which cats liked to be petted. "Do you think the horses would like us?" Emma asked seriously. "I think they'd love you," Jack said. "Especially Buttercup. She's getting old and doesn't get as much attention as she used to. I bet she'd enjoy some gentle company." Sarah watched this interaction with growing amazement. Jack had a natural way with children that spoke of genuine affection rather than mere tolerance. He answered their questions thoughtfully, never talking down to them or dismissing their concerns as childish. After breakfast, Jack suggested they open some presents he had managed to put together that morning. Sarah started to protest. They had nothing to give him in return, but he waved away her objections. "Found some things around the house," he said mysteriously. "Nothing fancy, but seemed wrong to let Christmas pass without something under the tree." He led them into the living room, where Sarah saw that a small pine tree had appeared overnight in the corner, decorated with simple ornaments and twinkling lights. Underneath were 3 wrapped packages. "When did you?" Sarah began, but Jack just smiled and encouraged the girls to open their gifts. Emma unwrapped a book about horses, beautifully illustrated and clearly well loved. Inside the front cover, Sarah glimpsed an inscription in a child's handwriting, "To Daddy, from Tommy." Her throat tightened as she realized Jack was giving away something precious from his son's collection. Lily's package contained a small stuffed horse, soft and brown with a gentle expression. She clutched it immediately to her chest, declaring that its name was Chocolate and that it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Sarah's gift was a warm wool sweater, clearly handmade and in surprisingly good condition. "It was Linda's," Jack explained quietly. "She always said clothes should be worn, not stored away. Thought she'd like knowing it was keeping someone warm." The gesture moved Sarah to tears. These weren't random gifts hastily purchased to fulfill social obligation. Each item had been chosen with care and given with meaning that went far beyond their material value. "Jack, these are too personal," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "We can't accept things that belong to your family. They're just sitting in closets gathering dust," Jack said firmly. "Linda and Tommy would want them to be useful, to make someone happy. Especially kids." Emma looked up from her book with shining eyes. "Mr. Jack, this is the best present ever. Will you teach me about the horses like in the pictures?" "If your mama says it's okay," Jack replied, glancing at Sarah for permission. As the morning progressed, Sarah found herself relaxing in ways she had forgotten were possible. The house felt warm and alive with her daughters' voices, and Jack seemed to thrive on their energy and questions. She caught him smiling frequently, genuine expressions of pleasure that transformed his weathered face. Around mid-morning, Jack suggested they bundle up and take that promised trip to see the horses. Emma and Lily needed no further encouragement, racing upstairs to put on their thin jackets. Sarah followed more slowly, still processing the surreal shift their lives had taken. Jack met them at the front door with extra winter gear. "These might be a little big, but they'll keep you warmer than what you've got," he said, handing out heavy coats, gloves, and knit hats. The gear was clearly sized for adults and older children, but Sarah didn't question where it had come from. She was beginning to understand that Jack Morrison was a man who kept things, who held onto pieces of his past not out of inability to let go, but out of hope that someday they might be useful again. The walk to the horse paddock was magical in the crisp morning air. Snow crunched under their feet, and their breath formed white clouds that dissipated quickly in the dry air. The ranch stretched out around them in rolling hills covered in pristine white, broken only by the dark shapes of cattle in distant pastures and the geometric lines of fences and outbuildings. "It's so quiet," Emma observed, her voice filled with wonder. "City kids," Jack chuckled. "Wait until you hear what real quiet sounds like out here at night." The horses came to the fence as soon as they saw Jack approaching. Sarah counted 6 animals of various sizes and colors, all looking well fed and cared for. Their breath steamed in the cold air, and their coats were thick with winter growth. "This is Buttercup," Jack said, approaching a golden-colored mare with a graying muzzle. "She's 22 years old, which is getting up there for a horse." Buttercup extended her nose toward Emma's outstretched hand, breathing softly on her palm before accepting the carrot Jack had provided. "She's so soft," Emma breathed, gently stroking the horse's neck. Lily was initially more cautious, hiding behind Sarah's legs until a smaller pinto horse wandered over to investigate. "This one's Patches," Jack explained. "She's our gentlest horse. Good with kids." Soon both girls were feeding carrots and apples to the horses under Jack's careful supervision, their fear replaced by delight and wonder. Sarah watched them interact with the animals and felt something shift inside her chest. For months, her daughters had lived in a constant state of stress and uncertainty. Here, finally, they could just be children again. "They're naturals," Jack observed, watching Emma confidently offer treats to a large bay gelding. "Got good instincts with animals." "Emma's always loved anything with 4 legs," Sarah said. "We used to visit a petting zoo in Denver sometimes, but it's been..." She trailed off, not wanting to bring the shadow of their recent troubles into this bright moment. "Kids need animals," Jack said simply. "Teaches them about responsibility and caring for something besides themselves." They spent over an hour with the horses, Jack patiently answering endless questions about feed, grooming, riding, and care. He showed them the barn where hay was stored, the tack room with its leather saddles and bridles, and the feed room where grain was measured out twice daily. "Do you ride them?" Emma asked, running her hand along a well-worn saddle. "Every day," Jack confirmed. "Ranch work requires good horses. These girls earn their keep." "Could we learn to ride?" Emma asked hopefully. Jack glanced at Sarah, who nodded slightly. "If you're here long enough, I don't see why not. Start with leading them around, maybe sitting on their backs while someone holds the lead rope." The casual reference to them staying longer wasn't lost on Sarah. She found herself hoping desperately that Jack's offer was genuine, that this sanctuary might be more than a temporary reprieve. As they walked back to the house for lunch, Lily skipped ahead with her new stuffed horse, chattering excitedly about everything she had learned. Emma stayed close to Jack, asking more sophisticated questions about ranch management and horse training. "How many cows do you have?" Emma wanted to know. "About 300 head," Jack replied. "Plus calves born this spring." "That's a lot of animals to take care of by yourself," Emma observed with the practical wisdom of a child who had learned early that resources were limited. "I've got help," Jack said. "2 ranch hands who work with me full-time, and we hire extra folks during branding and roundup seasons." "What's branding?" Emma asked, and Jack launched into an explanation of ranch traditions that had Sarah smiling despite herself. Her daughter's curious mind had found something to latch onto, something that engaged her intelligence and imagination. Back at the house, Jack prepared a simple lunch of sandwiches and soup while the girls played with Lily's new stuffed horse and looked through Emma's book. Sarah found herself helping automatically, falling into a domestic rhythm that felt both foreign and familiar. "Jack," she said quietly as they worked side by side in the kitchen, "I need to ask you something directly." He looked up from slicing cheese, his expression attentive. "What are your expectations here?" Sarah continued. "I'm grateful beyond words for what you've done, but I need to understand what you're thinking long-term. We can't impose on your kindness indefinitely." Jack set down his knife and turned to face her fully. "What are you asking exactly?" "I'm asking if this is just for Christmas, or if you're thinking we might stay longer. I need to know so I can plan, figure out our next steps." Jack was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving to the girls playing in the next room. When he spoke, his voice carried careful consideration. "Truth is, I'm not sure what I'm thinking," he admitted. "Last night, I just saw people who needed help and offered what I could. This morning..." He paused, searching for words. "This morning, I woke up and my house felt alive for the first time in 12 years. Sarah felt her heart skip slightly at the raw honesty in his voice. I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now, Jack continued. But, if you're willing, I'd like you and the girls to stay as long as you need to get back on your feet. However long that takes. What would you want in return? Sarah asked, needing to understand the terms of such an arrangement. Help with the house, maybe. Cooking, cleaning, things like that. The ranch hands handle the cattle work mostly, but having someone manage the household side of things would be. He paused, considering. Would be nice. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of ulterior motives or hidden expectations. But Jack's expression remained open and honest, tinged with a loneliness that matched her own. You'd trust us in your house? Around your belongings, your memories? Already am, Jack pointed out. Besides, houses are meant to be lived in. Memories don't disappear just because life moves forward. There was something profound in his acceptance of change, his willingness to let new experiences coexist with treasured memories. Sarah thought about the book he had given Emma, the sweater that had belonged to his wife. These weren't the actions of someone clinging desperately to the past, but of someone ready to honor it while embracing the possibility of a different future. The girls would need to go to school, Sarah said, testing the practicality of his offer. Cedar Ridge has a good elementary school. Bus route comes right past the ranch gate. And I'd need to find work eventually. Some way to contribute financially. Jack nodded. There are always jobs in town for people willing to work. Take your time finding something that makes sense for your family. His use of the word family sent warmth through Sarah's chest. For months, she had felt like a unit broken off from the larger world, struggling alone without connection or support. The idea of being part of something bigger again, even temporarily, was almost overwhelming. Can I think about it? She asked. Take all the time you need, Jack said. No pressure either way. As they finished preparing lunch, Sarah found herself studying this man who had appeared in their lives like an answer to prayers she hadn't dared voice. Jack Morrison was clearly someone who had suffered profound loss, yet somehow retained the capacity for generosity and hope. He moved through his life with quiet purpose, maintaining this ranch and caring for his animals with the dedication of someone who understood that meaningful work could be its own form of healing. During lunch, the girls regaled Sarah with detailed accounts of their morning with the horses, their excitement infectious. Emma had already begun planning how she would help with feeding and grooming, while Lily insisted that Chocolate the stuffed horse needed to meet his real-life counterparts again soon. Mr. Jack said maybe tomorrow we could help him feed the horses if it's not too cold, Emma announced importantly. Did he now? Sarah replied, raising an eyebrow at Jack. Only if you think it's appropriate, Jack said quickly. Morning chores are a good way to start the day. Gives kids a sense of responsibility. Sarah could see the appeal of such structure for her daughters. Emma especially had been adrift without clear expectations and meaningful tasks. The idea of contributing to the functioning of the ranch would give her purpose that went beyond mere survival. After lunch, Jack suggested they might like to rest while he checked on the cattle in the far pastures. Sarah gratefully accepted the offer, recognizing that her daughters needed quiet time to process all the new experiences. She settled the girls in the living room with books and crayons Jack had produced from somewhere in the house. As they colored and looked through picture books, Sarah sat by the window watching Jack drive across the snowy fields in his pickup truck, following cattle paths that were invisible to her inexperienced eyes. The peace of the afternoon wrapped around them like a blanket. Lily dozed against Sarah's side while Emma read quietly, occasionally sharing interesting facts about horses from her new book. The fireplace crackled softly, and snow continued to fall gently outside the windows. For the first time since Miguel's death, Sarah felt something approaching contentment. Not the desperate relief of immediate crisis averted, but genuine peace. Her daughters were safe, warm, and happy. She was in a place where she could rest and think without constant fear about where they would sleep or what they would eat. As the afternoon light began to fade, Jack returned from his rounds. Sarah could hear him in the mudroom, stomping snow off his boots and hanging up his coat. The familiar sounds of someone coming home filled the house with warmth. How were the cattle? Emma asked when Jack appeared in the living room. fat and happy, Jack reported. Got plenty of hay to last through the winter, and the snow's not deep enough to cause problems yet. Do you like being a rancher? Emma asked with characteristic directness. Jack settled into his favorite chair with a slight grunt of fatigue. Most days. It's hard work, but honest work. You know at the end of each day whether you've done right by the animals depending on you. My daddy did honest work too, Emma said quietly. He built things. Houses and buildings where people could live and work. Sarah felt her throat tighten at the mention of Miguel, but Jack's response surprised her. That's important work, he said seriously. Building things that last, that keep people safe and comfortable. Your daddy sounds like he was a good man. He was, Emma agreed with simple certainty. He always said that work wasn't just about money. It was about making things better for other people. Jack nodded approvingly. Smart man. Sounds like he raised a smart daughter too. The easy way Jack acknowledged Miguel's memory and honored his impact touched Sarah deeply. So many people, when faced with widows and children, seemed uncomfortable mentioning the deceased spouse, as if speaking of them might cause additional pain. Jack's willingness to let Miguel remain part of their story, to validate his importance to his daughters, spoke to an understanding of grief that could only come from experience. As evening approached, Jack began preparing another substantial meal. Sarah insisted on helping, finding comfort in the ordinary domestic tasks of chopping vegetables and setting the table. Emma and Lily played nearby, their voices creating a soundtrack of childhood that filled the house with life. During dinner, Jack asked Sarah about her background, her education, the work she had done before Miguel's death. The questions were gentle and interested rather than intrusive, and Sarah found herself talking about dreams and plans she hadn't thought about in months. I was studying to be a teacher before Emma was born, she admitted. Never finished my degree, but I always thought maybe someday. Good teachers are always needed, Jack observed. Kids like having adults who understand what it means to work hard and care about others. The casual way he affirmed her abandoned ambitions made Sarah wonder if she might someday find a way back to those dreams. Here, in the stability of ranch life with its predictable rhythms and clear expectations, perhaps she could imagine a future that included her own goals alongside her daughter's needs. After dinner, they gathered again in the living room. Jack surprised them by producing a guitar from somewhere and offering to play some songs. Emma and Lily were delighted, requesting everything from Christmas carols to folk songs they remembered from school. Jack's voice was pleasant and untrained, but he played with the ease of someone who had been making music for his own pleasure for many years. Sarah found herself relaxing completely for the first time since Miguel's death, lulled by the music and the warmth of the fire. Do you know any songs in Spanish? Emma asked hopefully. Jack's face lit up with interest. A few. What would you like to hear? Emma requested a lullaby that Miguel used to sing, and, to Sarah's amazement, Jack knew it. His pronunciation wasn't perfect, but the melody was correct, and both girls sang along with bright voices. As the evening wound down and they prepared for bed, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary nature of their Christmas day. 12 hours ago, she had been a desperate woman with no resources and no prospects, focused entirely on survival from one moment to the next. Now she was tucking her daughters into beds in a warm house, listening to them chatter excitedly about horses and ranch life and all the possibilities that might await them. Mama, Emma said as Sarah pulled the covers up to her chin, do you think we could stay here? Really stay, not just for a few days? Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair, choosing her words carefully. Would you want to stay here? Even if it meant changing schools and leaving Denver permanently? There's nothing left for us in Denver, Emma said with wisdom beyond her years. And Mr. Jack is nice. He makes you smile again. The observation caught Sarah off guard. She hadn't realized her emotional state was so transparent to her 8-year-old daughter. And there are horses, Lily added sleepily from her own bed. I like horses. I know you do, baby, Sarah said, kissing Lily's forehead. We'll see what happens. Nothing has to be decided tonight. But, as she said the words, Sarah realized that in her heart, the decision had already been made. This place, this man, this unexpected sanctuary represented everything they needed: safety, stability, purpose, and the possibility of healing. Jack Morrison had offered them not just shelter but the chance to rebuild their lives from a foundation of security and mutual care. The question now wasn't whether they would stay, but whether she had the courage to accept such an extraordinary gift. After months of loss and struggle, the idea of trusting in something good felt almost impossible. But, as she looked at her daughters' peaceful faces in their warm beds, Sarah knew she had to try. Tomorrow, she would talk to Jack about the practical details of making this arrangement work. Tonight, she would simply be grateful for the miracle of Christmas and the stranger who had become their salvation. The next few weeks passed in a blur of new routines and tentative hope. Sarah found herself settling into ranch life with surprising ease, her days structured around the natural rhythms of caring for animals and maintaining a household that was finally beginning to feel like home. Each morning began early with the sound of Jack starting coffee in the kitchen downstairs. Sarah would wake to this gentle signal and dress quickly, eager to help with the breakfast preparation that had become their shared responsibility. Emma and Lily adjusted to the early schedule with the adaptability of children, soon regarding 5:30 a.m. wake-ups as perfectly normal rather than a hardship. The morning routine became sacred to all of them. While Jack handled the outdoor chores of feeding horses and checking on cattle, Sarah would prepare breakfast and pack lunches. Emma had appointed herself chief helper, setting tables and organizing school supplies with the efficiency of someone who thrived on clear expectations. Lily, still too young for major responsibilities, contributed by feeding the barn cats who had quickly learned to appear at the kitchen door each morning. The school transition had gone more smoothly than Sarah had dared hope. Cedar Ridge Elementary was small enough that new students were genuine events rather than disruptions. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Henderson, was a veteran educator who understood that children from difficult circumstances often needed extra patience and support. Within a week, Emma was participating eagerly in classroom discussions and had made her first friend, a boy named Marcus who shared her fascination with animals. Lily had been enrolled in kindergarten and was blossoming under the attention of Miss Rodriguez, a young teacher who spoke Spanish and made Lily feel valued for her bilingual abilities rather than different because of them. Both girls rode the school bus that stopped at the end of the ranch drive, a small yellow vehicle that had become a symbol of normalcy and routine in their lives. While the girls were at school, Sarah threw herself into managing the household with an energy born of gratitude and purpose. The ranch house had clearly been neglected in the 12 years since Linda Morrison's death. Jack had maintained the basics: cleanliness, functionality, warmth, but the finer touches of homemaking had been abandoned. Sarah found deep satisfaction in reviving those details. She cleaned windows until they sparkled, organized closets that hadn't been touched in years, and gradually began redecorating spaces that had been frozen in time since the accident. Each change was made carefully, with Jack's permission and input, honoring the memories of his family while allowing new life to enter the house. The kitchen became her particular domain. Jack was a competent cook of simple, hearty meals, but Sarah brought creativity and variety to their menu that transformed eating from mere necessity to genuine pleasure. She made soups that simmered all day, filling the house with welcoming aromas. She baked bread and cookies, taught the girls to make tamales the way her grandmother had shown her, and slowly introduced Jack to Mexican dishes that honored Miguel's memory while creating new traditions. Jack, for his part, seemed to be discovering aspects of himself that had been dormant for over a decade. Sarah often caught him smiling unconsciously as he listened to the girls chatter about their school days. He began taking more care with his appearance, trimming his hair and wearing shirts that weren't exclusively functional. Most remarkably, he started talking about future plans, improvements to the ranch, ideas for expanding the horse operation, dreams that extended beyond simple maintenance of the status quo. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. The Morrison Ranch was becoming a place where people lived and thrived rather than simply existed. Neighbors began stopping by more frequently, drawn by the sounds of children playing and the sense of vitality that had returned to the property. Jack's ranch hands, Carlos and Pete, expressed amazement at their boss's improved mood and renewed energy. "Haven't seen him this happy since before the accident," Carlos confided to Sarah one afternoon as they watched Jack teaching Emma how to properly bridle a horse. "You and your girls have been good for him." Sarah was beginning to understand the truth of that observation. Jack Morrison had been living in a carefully controlled half-life, going through the motions of his daily responsibilities while avoiding anything that might remind him of loss or vulnerability. The presence of her family had forced him back into full engagement with life, and the results were remarkable to witness. But the arrangement was not without its challenges and complications. Sarah struggled with the ambiguity of their relationship and living situation. She was not an employee, exactly, though she performed household tasks in exchange for shelter and support. She was not family, though they shared meals and daily routines like relatives. She was not a romantic partner, though she sometimes caught herself noticing Jack's quiet strength and gentle manner with feelings that went beyond gratitude. The question of her long-term plans became a source of gentle but persistent anxiety. Job opportunities in Cedar Ridge were limited, and most of them were part-time positions that wouldn't provide enough income to support an independent household. Sarah applied for several positions and was eventually offered work at the local diner 3 days a week, but the wages were barely enough to cover basic expenses, let alone rent and childcare. Jack insisted that money wasn't an immediate concern, that she should take time to find work that was sustainable rather than jumping at the first opportunity. But Sarah chafed against the feeling of dependence, no matter how kindly offered. She had been responsible for herself and her children for too long to easily accept charity, even when it came wrapped in genuine care and affection. The emotional complexity of their situation became more apparent as winter deepened and their daily lives became more intertwined. Emma and Lily began referring to Jack as Uncle Jack without being prompted, a designation that pleased him enormously but left Sarah unsure about boundaries and expectations. When Lily had a nightmare about Daddy disappearing, it was Jack who heard her crying first and sat with her until she fell back asleep. When Emma struggled with a math concept, Jack spent an hour at the kitchen table helping her work through practice problems. These moments of surrogate fathering were beautiful to witness, but they also highlighted the impermanence of their arrangement. What would happen if Sarah found a job that required them to move? How would they explain to the girls that Uncle Jack wouldn't be part of their daily lives anymore? How could any of them return to the loneliness they had known before finding each other? The questions came to a head during a February blizzard that shut down the region for 3 days. School was cancelled, roads were impassable, and the 4 of them were snowbound together in the ranch house while wind howled around them and snow piled up to the windows. On the second day of the storm, while the girls were napping and Jack was checking on the animals in the barn, Sarah found herself alone in Linda Morrison's former sewing room, which she had been gradually converting into a home office where she could search for jobs online and manage their affairs. The room still contained remnants of Linda's interests, fabric samples, pattern books, a sewing machine that hadn't been used in over a decade. Sarah had been careful to preserve these items while making space for her own needs, but the presence of another woman's belongings served as a constant reminder of her temporary status in this house. As she sat at the desk Linda had once used, Sarah found herself imagining what it would be like to truly belong here. To make decisions about the household without seeking permission, to plan for holidays and celebrations, to invest in improvements and changes that would last beyond the immediate future. The fantasy was seductive and painful in equal measure. Jack found her there an hour later, staring out the window at the swirling snow with tears on her cheeks. "Sarah? You okay?" His voice was gentle with concern. She wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed to be caught in a moment of vulnerability. "I'm fine. Just feeling a little overwhelmed by everything." Jack settled into the chair across from her, his weathered face serious. "Want to talk about it?" Sarah had been avoiding this conversation for weeks, but the forced intimacy of the storm made evasion impossible. She took a deep breath and tried to organize her thoughts. "I need to know what you're thinking about the future," she said finally. "Not next week or next month, but really long term. Are we building something here, or are we just postponing the inevitable?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving around the room that had once belonged to his wife. When he spoke, his words came slowly, as if he was working through the ideas even as he voiced them. "When Linda and Tommy died, I thought my life was over," he said. "Not in a dramatic way, just over. Like the important part was finished and everything after that would just be going through the motions until my time came. Sarah nodded, recognizing the emotional landscape he described. These past few weeks, Jack continued, I've remembered what it feels like to have something to look forward to. To hear laughter in this house, to have people depending on me for more than just ranch work. He paused, looking directly at her. I know this situation isn't exactly conventional. I know you've got your pride and your independence to think about. But, if you're asking whether I want you and the girls to stay permanently, the answer is yes. Absolutely yes. Sarah felt her heart skip at his directness. As what, though? Your housekeeper? Your charity cases? I need to understand what role we'd have here. As family, Jack said without hesitation. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but family all the same. People who belong here, who have a stake in this place and a say in how it runs. The simplicity of his answer surprised her. She had been expecting conditions, expectations, complex negotiations about responsibilities and boundaries. Instead, he was offering unconditional belonging. And if I want to go back to school, she asked. If I want to finish my teaching degree? We'll figure out how to make it work, Jack said. There's a community college in Great Falls, about an hour away. Online programs. We'll find a way. What about your future? What if you meet someone, want to remarry? Jack's smile was gentle but sad. Sarah, I'm 53 years old and I've been alone for 12 years. If there was someone out there for me, I figure I would have found them by now. There was something final in his tone that suggested the conversation was really about more than practical arrangements. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of deeper feelings that might complicate their situation. What she saw was affection, certainly, and genuine care for her and her daughters. But she also saw a man who had made peace with solitude and wasn't looking for romantic love so much as meaningful connection. The girls love it here, Sarah said quietly. And I love having them here, Jack replied. They've brought this place back to life. I love it here too, Sarah admitted, surprised by her own boldness. Jack's expression softened completely. Then, stay. All of you, for as long as you want. Make this your home. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of Emma and Lily clattering down the stairs, their voices bright with excitement about sledding down the hill behind the house. But Sarah felt as though something fundamental had shifted between her and Jack. Not romance, exactly, but a deepening of their partnership and mutual commitment. Over the remaining day of the blizzard, they began making concrete plans for their permanent arrangement. Jack showed Sarah the financial records for the ranch, explaining income streams and expenses with the transparency of someone offering genuine partnership. They discussed improvements to the house, including converting an unused room into a proper bedroom for Sarah and potentially adding an office space where she could pursue her teaching studies. Most importantly, they talked about the girls' futures, school choices, college funds, the kinds of opportunities that life on a successful ranch could provide. Jack spoke about teaching Emma advanced horsemanship, about 4-H clubs and county fairs, about the leadership skills that came from growing up with real responsibilities. When the storm finally passed and normal routines resumed, the household felt subtly different. Sarah moved through the house with the confidence of someone who belonged there, making decisions about meals and schedules without second-guessing herself. Emma and Lily seemed to sense the change in status, referring to our house and our horses with casual ownership. The legal aspects of their arrangement were formalized through Jack's attorney in Great Falls, who helped them draft documents that gave Sarah official status as household manager and the girls as legal dependents for purposes of school enrollment and medical care. It wasn't adoption, exactly, but it provided the security and legitimacy that would allow them to build a real future together. Spring came early that year, bringing new life to the ranch in ways that went beyond the usual cycle of calving and foaling. Sarah enrolled in online courses toward her teaching degree, studying at the kitchen table while Emma did homework and Lily practiced reading aloud. Jack hired additional help for the busy season, confident that the household management was in capable hands. The girls thrived in ways that amazed Sarah daily. Emma became an accomplished writer, helping with basic ranch work and developing the quiet confidence that comes from competence with large animals. She joined the local 4-H club and began showing horses at county events, earning ribbons and, more importantly, the respect of adults who valued her dedication and skill. Lily blossomed socially and academically, her natural exuberance finding appropriate outlets in school activities and ranch life. She appointed herself chief welcomer of visitors to the ranch, charming neighbors and business associates with her bilingual chatter and infectious enthusiasm. Both girls began talking about Miguel naturally and easily, sharing memories of their father with Jack and incorporating his values into their new life. Sarah was moved to see how Jack encouraged these conversations, asking questions about Miguel's work and interests, helping the girls understand that loving their new life didn't mean forgetting their father. As summer approached, Sarah realized that she had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for, not just security and shelter, but true partnership in creating a meaningful life. Jack Morrison had offered them sanctuary in their darkest moment, but what had evolved was far more precious, a family built on mutual care, shared purpose, and the healing power of second chances. The transformation was visible to everyone who knew them. Neighbors commented on how happy Jack looked, how settled the girls seemed, how the ranch itself seemed more prosperous and welcoming. Carlos and Pete, the ranch hands, began bringing their own families around for barbecues and celebrations, drawn by the warmth and hospitality that had returned to Morrison Ranch. One evening in late June, as Sarah sat on the front porch watching Jack teach Lily to lasso fence posts while Emma groomed her favorite horse in the paddock nearby, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the chain of events that had brought them together. Miguel's death had been a tragedy that shattered their world, but somehow his memory had become part of the foundation of this new life rather than a barrier to moving forward. The ranch house hummed with the sounds of a busy family, homework discussions, laughter, the distant sounds of horses and cattle, Jack's guitar music drifting from the living room. It was the life Sarah had always imagined wanting but never quite believed possible for someone like her. As the sun set over the Montana hills and her daughters called good night from their bedroom windows, Sarah understood that home wasn't just about place or structure. It was about belonging, about people who chose to build something together out of love and commitment rather than mere obligation. Jack Morrison had given them shelter when they needed it most, but, more importantly, he had given them the chance to become part of something larger than their individual struggles and losses. The homeless family who had spent Christmas Eve on a bench outside a gas station no longer existed. In their place were the Morrison family, rooted in Montana soil and committed to a future they would create together, one day at a time. 2 years after that fateful Christmas Eve, Sarah stood at the window of what had once been Linda Morrison's sewing room and was now her home office, watching Emma prepare her horse for the county fair competition. At 10 years old, Emma moved around the large bay gelding with the confident grace of someone who had been born to ranch life, checking tack and adjusting stirrups with practiced efficiency. The transformation in all of them was remarkable, but nowhere was it more evident than in Emma herself. The serious, worried child who had tried so hard to be strong for her mother and younger sister had evolved into a poised young girl who radiated quiet confidence. Her shoulders no longer carried the weight of adult concerns, and her smile came easily and often. She had grown 3 inches in 2 years and had developed the lean strength that came from daily physical work and outdoor life. "Nervous about today?" Jack asked as he approached Emma's preparations, his own hands carrying grooming supplies and an extra blanket. "A little," Emma admitted, running a careful brush along her horse's flank. "Thunder and I have been practicing, but there are going to be kids there who've been riding since they were babies." Jack nodded seriously, treating her concerns with the respect they deserved. "What matters isn't how long you've been riding, but how well you and Thunder work together as a team. You two have that figured out better than most partnerships twice your age." Sarah smiled as she watched this interaction through the window. Jack had developed an extraordinary gift for encouraging the girls without dismissing their fears or offering false reassurance. He treated them as capable individuals whose feelings and concerns deserved serious consideration. "Uncle Jack is right," Lily called from where she was filling water buckets near the barn. At 7, she had become Emma's most enthusiastic supporter, attending every practice session and offering detailed commentary on technique and strategy. "You and Thunder are the best team ever." The easy use of Uncle Jack still warmed Sarah's heart. The title had emerged naturally from the girls' need to categorize their relationship with this man who was so much more than a family friend but wasn't quite a father. Jack had never corrected them or suggested an alternative, accepting the designation with visible pleasure. Sarah gathered her coffee and stepped onto the front porch to better observe the morning's activities. The county fair would begin in 3 hours, and this would be Emma's first major competition since she had begun serious riding training. For weeks, she had been practicing her horsemanship patterns and preparing Thunder for the various challenges they would face. The significance of the day went beyond simple competition. Emma's participation in the 4-H horse program represented full integration into the community life of Cedar Ridge. She was no longer the homeless girl who had arrived at Christmas, but a respected member of the local youth organization, known for her dedication and natural ability with animals. Jack appeared at Sarah's side, carrying his own coffee and wearing the clean jeans and good shirt that indicated this was a special occasion. "Ready for a day of watching our girl compete?" The casual use of "our girl" made Sarah's chest tight with emotion. Jack had never formally adopted the children, and Sarah had never asked him to, but his claim on them was absolute and mutual. He attended parent-teacher conferences, helped with homework, worried about their friends and activities with the intensity of someone whose investment in their futures was complete. "More than ready," Sarah replied. "Though I think I'm more nervous than she is." "That's what parents do," Jack said with a smile. "Worry about things our kids handle just fine on their own." The easy way he included himself in the category of parents spoke to how thoroughly their family had reformed itself around love rather than biology. Miguel remained an honored presence in their daily life through photographs, stories, and the values he had taught his daughters. But Jack had stepped into the practical role of father with such natural grace that even the girls sometimes forgot the arrangement wasn't traditional. As they prepared to leave for the fairgrounds, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her own life had changed. She had completed her teaching degree the previous spring through a combination of online coursework and weekend intensives at the state university. The local school district had immediately offered her a position teaching 3rd grade, which she would begin when the new school year started in 6 weeks. The prospect of returning to professional life excited her in ways she had almost forgotten were possible. For too long, her entire focus had been on basic survival and meeting her children's immediate needs. Now she could think beyond the next meal or the next place to sleep, planning lessons and considering how she might inspire young minds in the way that the best teachers had once inspired her. Jack had been instrumental in making her educational goals achievable. He had adjusted his own schedule to accommodate her class times, taken over childcare responsibilities during her weekend seminars, and helped finance her education with the matter-of-fact generosity that characterized all his gestures of support. When she tried to discuss repayment plans, he waved away her concerns with the observation that investing in her future was investing in their family's future. The fairgrounds were already bustling with activity when they arrived, filled with the organized chaos that characterized rural agricultural events. Children led livestock animals toward judging rings while parents carried supplies and grandparents found good viewing spots. The air smelled of hay and animals, cotton candy and barbecue, with the underlying excitement that comes from community celebration. Emma's confidence wavered slightly as she observed the other young riders, some of whom had clearly been competing for years. Their equipment was more expensive, their horses more finely bred, their movements showing the polish that comes from extensive training. "Remember what we talked about," Jack said quietly, helping Emma unload Thunder from the trailer. "You're not here to compete with anyone except yourself. Show the judges what you and Thunder can do together, and be proud of how far you've come." Sarah watched her daughter absorb this advice, seeing her shoulders straighten and her expression become more focused. Emma had inherited her father's work ethic and her mother's determination, but she had learned from Jack the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you belong in any space you choose to occupy. The first competition was showmanship, where riders would be judged on their ability to present their horses to best advantage through precise movements and careful grooming. Emma led Thunder into the ring with steady composure, executing each required pattern with the careful attention to detail that characterized all her endeavors. Sarah found herself holding her breath as the judge examined Thunder's grooming and watched Emma demonstrate various skills. The other parents seemed more relaxed, suggesting their children had been through this process many times before. Sarah's anxiety came not from inexperience but from understanding how much this day meant to Emma's sense of belonging in her new community. When Emma and Thunder completed their routine, the applause was generous and genuine. Sarah could see that her daughter had performed well, though the placing wouldn't be announced until all contestants had completed the class. "She looked great out there," said a woman standing nearby, extending her hand to Sarah. "I'm Janet Williams, Bobby's mom. That's him over there with the paint horse." Sarah introduced herself, grateful for the friendly overture. Over the past 2 years, she had learned that rural communities could be insular and slow to accept newcomers, but they also valued character and contribution over pedigree and background. "This is Emma's first year competing," Sarah explained. "We're still learning how everything works. She's got natural ability," Janet observed. "And Jack Morrison knows horses better than anyone in 3 counties. If he's been training her, she's in good hands." The easy acceptance of their family arrangement in Janet's comment reflected the community's gradual embrace of their unconventional household. Rural people understood that families came in many forms and that what mattered was how well children were loved and raised rather than the specific legal relationships involved. The showmanship results were announced an hour later, and Emma placed 3rd out of 12 competitors. The ribbon was blue with white trim, and Emma's smile as she accepted it was radiant with pride and accomplishment. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked as Emma rejoined them after the award ceremony. "Good," Emma said, stroking Thunder's neck affectionately. "Really good. We did our best, and it was enough." The mature wisdom in her daughter's response amazed Sarah. At 10 years old, Emma had learned to find satisfaction in effort and improvement rather than demanding perfection or victory. These were lessons that many adults struggled with, but Emma had absorbed them naturally through Jack's patient teaching and example. The next competition was Western Pleasure, where horses and riders would be judged on smooth gaits and quiet, responsive communication. Emma's class included 15 other young riders, and Sarah could see that the competition would be considerably more challenging than showmanship. As Emma warmed up Thunder in the practice ring, Sarah found herself in conversation with other parents, sharing stories and observations about their children's involvement with horses. She was struck by how naturally she fit into this community of adults whose lives revolved around supporting their children's agricultural interests. "Sarah," a familiar voice called out, and she turned to see Maria Santos approaching with a warm smile. Maria was a teacher at the elementary school who had become a close friend over the past year, someone who understood both the challenges of education and the complexities of single parenthood. "I didn't know you were coming today," Sarah said, embracing her friend warmly. "Wouldn't miss it," Maria replied. "Emma's become quite the local celebrity with her horse skills. The kids at school are always asking me about her competitions." The idea that Emma had achieved local celebrity status for positive reasons filled Sarah with pride. Her daughter had found a way to distinguish herself through dedication and skill, earning recognition based on merit rather than circumstances. Jack appeared at Sarah's shoulder, his expression focused but calm. "She's ready," he said simply. "Thunder's moving well, and Emma's riding with confidence." As they moved toward the show ring, Sarah felt a familiar surge of nervous energy that she had come to associate with important moments in her children's lives. The difference now was that she didn't face these moments alone. Jack's steady presence beside her provided the kind of partnership in parenting that she had taken for granted during her marriage to Miguel but had learned to treasure after years without it. Emma's class was called, and 12 young riders entered the ring on horses that ranged from seasoned show animals to well-trained ranch horses like Thunder. The judge called for various gaits: walk, trot, canter, and Sarah watched her daughter settle into the rhythm of competition with growing confidence. Thunder responded beautifully to Emma's subtle cues, moving with the steady reliability that had made him Jack's choice as the perfect horse for a beginning rider. Emma sat straight and relaxed in the saddle, her hands quiet and her legs steady, presenting the picture of a young rider who had developed genuine partnership with her mount. "She looks like she belongs out there," Jack murmured, his voice tight with parental pride. Sarah nodded, unable to speak around the emotion in her throat. Emma did look like she belonged, not just in the show ring, but in this life they had built together. The scared, hungry child who had spent Christmas Eve on a bench outside a gas station had become a confident young girl who could hold her own in any setting. The class continued for 20 minutes as the judge evaluated each horse and rider combination. Sarah found herself relaxing as she watched Emma's consistent performance, recognizing that regardless of placement, her daughter was riding better than she ever had before. When the judge finally called for lineup, Emma positioned Thunder with the calm efficiency of someone who had learned to trust her own abilities. As the placings were announced, Sarah held her breath. Third place, number 47, Emma Martinez riding Thunder. The arena erupted in applause as Emma rode forward to accept her second ribbon of the day.